Hi there, and it's Deb and Beck, and welcome to our YouTube show. So we are really excited this week that we have started our 5-day free money exploration. We're actually, as we are recording this, we're actually on day 3.
Yep.
And it's been really good fun. We just had a conversation with a lovely lady all about money and the stuff that she has seen around money. So yeah, it's a really interesting one. So if you want to dive in, you can catch up with where we are now. And if if money's been one of those things, because I absolutely know it was for me for the longest time, if money's been one of those things where you get caught out, after we've done these 5 days, we're going to do a full 30-day exploration, which you might be interested in diving a little bit deeper with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can find out all about that on the website or drop us a message. And the other thing that we were just talking about, interestingly, with the same person, we just had a fantastic conversation with someone. And we were talking about our mentoring program, because we've been doing a lot of work in the last week or two and kind of reviewing what we do. We just, with all our stuff, we just want to keep making it bigger and better. And so we've kind of looked at some of how we do our mentoring and added some more fantastic stuff in, chopped and changed it a little bit. And at the moment, we're going to be offering some one-to-one mentoring slots. So we've got some available. So if that's something you're maybe a little bit interested in, get in touch. We'd love to kind of chat with you about kind of how that works and if it's something that might be a fit for you. If you're not quite sure yet and you want to try the mini mentoring, that's starting very soon. So have a look at that on our website. That's dareToBeYou.co.uk.
Right, so let's dive into this week's show. So we've got a very interesting question, what is helpful? And our topic, we're going to be talking all about forgiveness, but we're starting off as usual with this week's living and learning. So, oh gosh, something very interesting happened last week when we were actually on the show. We were in here when we were recording our show and we were chatting away. And then after the show had finished, we just took a break. We were having a few minutes, and I looked out of the window, out our back window, and there was this pot in the middle of the lawn. And I kind of looked at it for a minute, and I was like, and it was quite windy. I was like, well, I wonder what that is, I wonder where that's come from. And it looked suspiciously like one of the plant pots that my lovely new babies for my garden were growing quite happily in. So my mind was kind of going, no, it can't be that, because it's upside down in the middle of the lawn. But yes, much to my dismay at that moment, our greenhouse had actually blown over in the wind, and all the plants and everything that we had been nurturing and watching and kind of watching them grow millimeter by millimeter, it was all topsy-turvy. It was all over the place. And I really had a moment of kind of, no, this can't be happening. This can't be happening. Please, no, not my greenhouse, not my babies. And it was really interesting. We kind of went into rescue mode then and kind of got back as many of the plants as we could. We retrieved what we could retrieve. And pretty soon I was kind of back to being okay with that's what had happened. But it was a really interesting thing for me to watch what happened and where my thinking went, and the feelings that kind of went along that. And it really reminded me of how much we live in the feeling of our thinking, and that all of our pain comes from not liking what is actually happening, arguing with what is going on, arguing with the reality. From the minute I saw that pot in the middle of the lawn, somewhere in me I knew what that pot was, because I recognized the pot from planting. And I didn't want to recognize it. So my brain was furiously trying to find another reason why this thing could be upside down in the middle of my lawn. And obviously it wasn't. And I just found it fascinating to kind of watch how painful it was when I was saying, no, this isn't what I want. This isn't how it should be. Reality should not be unfolding in this way. No, thank you. Stop now. And then kind of at some point, when I came to peace with this is what reality is, then, that my equilibrium returned. And I know, that was a greenhouse. It was a few plants. It was nothing. But it's really like what we point towards, this understanding that we point towards, it's like everything starts off as neutral, and then we have thinking about it, and we disagree with how it should be, or we agree with how it should be, and that is where our pain and discomfort comes from. That is how reality works. That is what is going on. And we were having a bit of a discussion before we came on this about how we play with that, and how we personally play around with that, and how, part of our show and what we do here is an invitation for you to play around with it. And in places like that, where it is a greenhouse or is something that you're invested in enough that in that moment it's like, no. But it's not the be all and end all to you. We begin to see how reality works. We begin to see how that unfolding works. And then we see it's no different, no matter what it is that's unfolding, no matter what it is that's in front of us. When everything in us screams no, we suffer. When we go with how reality is unfolding in front of us, we don't suffer. And then we have this kind of, there's something about us, there's something within us that, like, right now we've replanted some of the seeds, that we've rescued the greenhouse, we've rescued what plants we can. And life has this amazing way of finding a way when in that moment it looked like there wasn't a way. When I saw that pot on the lawn, it was like, there's no way forward with this. That's it. It's over. And okay, that wasn't, a big deal. But in that moment, it felt like it was. And it's like seeing that's what life does. That's how life works. It feels like this is the end. But then there is something in us. There is a spark. There is something deeper. There is something awesome and amazing and beautiful within us that, just like the plants, there was a couple of the little things that I actually lifted up and I just put back into a tray, and I think I might have even put them in upside down, but over the week some seedlings have come, they've grown through there. And it feels to me like there is something in us, that resilience, this thing that keeps us going. There is something about us. And I think these little things these things that play out in our life are beautiful lessons for us to kind of see, life self-writes, doesn't it? When we picked up those little pots that had spilled out everywhere and just kind of put them, some of those seedlings have found their way to the light. Some of them are starting to come, and some of them are actually looking quite strong. And yet there was a moment there when it looked like, this is it, this whole garden thing's over, that's it. And how many times in your life have you kind of looked at something and thought, that's it, there's nowhere to go now, this is it, this is my ending, this is as far as it can happen. And I think if we can see past that, if we can know something deeper about ourselves, there is a way that those seedlings find their way to the light. There is something within us that continues to do that. So I found it really helpful that happened to the greenhouse. In other areas of my life, like some of the stuff that I'm struggling with in lockdown, and it's like, we find a way. We, like those amazing plants that just grow towards the light, it's kind of programmed into them. Those seeds that just look like they're nothing, there's something programmed into them that they don't give up. They just keep going until they find the light. And I think, it's been lovely for me to be reminded that that's us too.
Yeah, that was a real moment, wasn't it, when we saw it was just mud everywhere and seeds everywhere, and
all the hard work, the hours of hard work.
It definitely took our breath away for a minute.
It did.
Yeah. So I think for me, like, over the last week, what I've been seeing again is this kind of, and I think that touches really nicely on what Deb was sharing there, is that trust in life that we can have, that there's this place we can come back to where actually everything is okay. And I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday who has seen the place in them where they're kind of okay, has seen that place and had the experience of their mind quietening down, but has then also had the experience of, my mind's really busy, I've got too much to do, I've got too much responsibility, I need to get everything done, it's all on me. And what kind of, during that conversation yesterday, I was really resonating with what was being shared by that person, because I've been there, as in, you know, I've had jobs where I've felt that way. I've had circumstances where I'm kind of like, yeah, I've got a to-do list that's longer than my arm. I can't get it all done. It's all on me. People interrupt and I can't get through my to-do list. And then I've also had experiences of my mind quietening down and feeling totally at peace. And what I kind of saw when we were having this conversation yesterday was how easily we kind of say, when I'm at a retreat, or when I'm at this person's house, or when I go on holiday, I can find that quiet mind and it's there and it's available. But when I'm in my office, when I'm doing my job, when people are relying on me, when I've got a list longer than my arm, that peace isn't there, because I'm busy, because we all know that it's hard to do our jobs. We all know that we have too much on. And it was very much in that conversation, what I saw again was that place in me where, when I take that stance, when I kind of go into something with, this is going to be hard, there's going to be more to do than I can cope with, it's all on my shoulders, I'm out of balance. I'm in that position of, you know, I'm trying to do God's job. I'm taking on something that's above my pay grade, if you like. And it's seeing, for me, I really saw in that conversation again yesterday, how that quiet mind isn't connected to our circumstance. It isn't only available when I'm on a retreat, or I'm doing yoga, or I'm out for a nice walk in nature, but it doesn't exist when I'm in the office. It's always available. And I think what we can do, and what definitely I've done in the past, is kind of have it set up that quiet mind is only available in these places that I've labeled available. And then in these places it's absolutely not available. And if I was even brave enough to look to see if it was, that's irresponsible. Because if I have a quiet mind, I won't get all my work done. I don't get work done if I'm in a quiet mind. I need to be, at it, and I need to be taking it all on, and I need to be serious about it. And actually it's the opposite. I've really seen that when I'm operating from a quieter mind, when I'm in the space of, I can take responsibility for what's on my to-do list, but I can know that I'm not responsible. From that space, I actually get more done, and the stuff that I do is of a higher quality. Whereas when my mind is really, really busy and really loud and full of stuff, and I'm taking on the full responsibility and living from a space of, it's on me, I must do it, it has to be done by this time, my mind is so busy that what I actually do get done, if anything, it's not very good quality. My mind's all over the place. I'm on, 5 different things at once, which our mind can't actually do. It can't handle that much at once anyway. And I really like the conversation we were having yesterday. It really kind of reminded me again how easy it is to slip into that place of, it's irresponsible to to think that I don't have to work extra hard, to think that I don't have to be taking on all the responsibility. It's irresponsible to think that a quiet mind will get work done. But actually it's seeing that it does. It's seeing that from that quiet space, when our mind settles down, we're actually so much more available to what's in front of us. We're so much better at turning up to what's ours to do. And it is a much lighter experience of whatever those responsibilities are. Because I don't think that what happens is my mind quietens and I suddenly find that, I have no responsibilities and there's nothing I want to do in life. I just find that when I am quieter internally, then the things that I want to do become easier. They kind of happen through me in a much easier, lighter way than when I'm kind of in this resistant space of, I must do it all, but I've got too much. I must do it all, but there's too much. When I'm in that space, there's very little productivity. There's very little capacity to do any of the things that I need to do. And actually from a quieter mind, as that settles, as I really look and see, I can do this by taking responsibility and knowing I'm not responsible. Something in me quietens down, and what I produce and how much I get through is just, it's beyond what I used to think I could do. And that would just, I don't know, the conversation we were having yesterday, it really brought that back to me, that I can trust that. It looks like it's the wrong way around. It looks like the more fierce and furious and worried I am, the more I'll get through. But actually it's the opposite. and being reminded that I can trust that. I can trust that when I come back to a quiet, still place, what is meant to be done will be done. Because I don't know quite how that works as a human being, but it really does. I've seen it again and again, and it's somehow coming back to the opposite of what we're driven when it's our mind that's kind of running the show. What we're driven to do actually isn't as productive and helpful as when we come back to our heart and quiet and write down.
What's coming to me when you're saying that is, overwhelm, and it's kind of seeing that. For me, it's really obvious in this moment when we're sat here like this and we're feeling calm. It's really obvious to me that overwhelm is to do with my mind and nothing to do with all the jobs that I have to do. And yet the minute I go up into my head, it looks to me that overwhelm is to do with all the things that I have to do. And to me, it's kind of like, it's a clue to me when I'm thinking, no, it's to do with what I have to do, that I'm in my head.
Yeah.
And it's not, when we fall into our hearts, it's not that is less to do. And, whether you describe it as your heart or the zone or whatever kind of, but there is definitely a place where it's just like, yeah, there's a lot of jobs to do. Let's get on with them and let's do them from a peaceful kind of, let's just work through this and that's fine. And what we do is okay. And then there's this place of when we go into our head. I know, I can't remember whether it was last week, but it fairly recently anyway, I'd got to print something off, and we have problems in our office with our printer. It kind of, or the computer or whatever it is, the two sort of don't want to acknowledge each other. They're very close together, and they kind of refuse.
Like a family feud.
Yes, they kind of refuse to acknowledge that the other one exists. So you send something to print, and the computer very helpfully says, "You haven't got a printer. There is no printer detected." And I'm kind of like, it's here. And it was really interesting to me because I got this thing that I wanted to print off. And I was doing everything that you should, and then I was trying, doing everything I could to make this thing print. And Beck said to me, why don't you leave it for a minute and go and have lunch and come back to it? And everything in me wanted to kind of say, have you got no idea, Beck? I need to get this, that feeling. And it felt really overwhelming and like I've got to do it in this moment. And then this kind of voice went, you're right in your head about this, and you are. And even in my own mind, I'm arguing, I'm going, no, I'm not. This is true. I've got to print this. And that to me is one of those times where we recognize, or for me, then it's recognizing I'm in my head. I feel overwhelmed. It felt heavy, like there was loads to do and I had to do it and it has to be done now. And that to me is a clue that I've moved into my head.
Yeah.
And it's like the minute we kind of get out of that, and we sort of know we have that wisdom, don't we? Like you said, let's go and have lunch or something. And I knew she was right. But everything in me's going, no. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who's felt like that.
No, guess what? It's something about when we have a feeling that kind of appears that strong.
Yeah.
It comes as though it's got real information for us.
Absolutely.
And it's saying the information's out there, the printer's the problem, the to-do list's the problem.
And it's nothing to do with your mind. It's not my mind. It's not my mind creating this. And yet the minute, and it is that, it's very, very, it can be very difficult in those moments to do the opposite thing. When someone suggests you go to lunch, what comes up into you is to punch them in the face or something because they've completely got this wrong, and then they have no idea how important this thing is. It really kind of comes like that, doesn't it?
It
really
feels that feeling has really important information for you.
Only somebody stupid would suggest taking a minute
something different.
It really has that feeling. But there is something in us that knows that. And I think it's then, for me, being in this conversation kind of points us to that
somewhere else, doesn't it? Like, get to know what it is that feeling's actually telling you.
Yeah, because we all know, when we're having this conversation, I bet there's nobody out there that's kind of going, well, no, what you should do is keep working on getting that printing done. We're all kind of like, even if it is only take a breath and take a minute, we all kind of know that's what we need to get out of our head, out of that overwhelm, out of that thing that our mind is making up, and into a more helpful space. because from a more helpful space, things occur to you. And interestingly, that printing did get done after lunch. Yeah. And I think that really, really beautifully brings us into our question this week. What is helpful? And I think that is an absolutely great starter, isn't it, for what is helpful. I think it is hugely helpful for us as human beings to recognize how we work in that way and know our own stuff, because for me, if something's coming out of my mouth in those moments, to kind of say, no, lunch is the worst idea in the world, it's kind of like, the more I know myself, the more I know that's a trick of my mind, and the more likely I am not to listen to that, because I recognize it's a trick of the mind. And trust me, I know how powerfully the mind can trick us in those moments. Even talking about it, I can kind of get into that, the feeling of what it was like to want to do that printing and to want to do it on my terms, on my time, when I wanted to do it. And it was like really frustrating when somebody then kind of says, well, let's take 5 minutes. I know in this conversation that we have a lot, about the principles and about how thought creates our reality. Very often there's a phrase that is kind of bandied around a lot, it's just a thought, which is a harmless phrase. And, it's true, everything, thought creates our reality. And when we are in those places, it is literally, that is the thinking we have in that moment. All that's going on for you is you are having a thought and believing it to be true. So it is simply a thought that appears real to you in that moment. But it's one of those things when you've been around this for a little while, it's really, really easy to watch people. And I'm sure, if you're the person on the outside watching somebody struggle with their printer issue or whatever it is, it's really clear that that's just their thinking in that moment. They're trapped in that thinking. It's like, but one of the least helpful things to do in that moment is to say to someone, it's just your thinking, don't take any notice of it. It's kind of like
it can certainly feel unhelpful, can't it, when someone says that to you? And yet, interestingly, at the same time, there have definitely been times in across the board in history where someone has said something like that. Like the whole everything we share comes originally from a man called Sydney Banks, who had an experience where he was sat next to somebody and he was telling them about being insecure, and the man said, "You're not insecure, you just think you are."
And that started,
and that's it. Yeah. That one sentence effectively spiraled a whole lot of a spiritual, deep understanding of how life truly works. And it's like in that moment, that to me, the way he said that was the equivalent of saying, Deb, you're struggling with the printer, it's just your thinking. And in that moment, that was incredibly helpful to Sydney Banks. So when we kind of ask the question, what is helpful? There isn't a one size fits all answer. It's literally moment to moment, anything can be helpful, but equally that same thing could be unhelpful in another moment with a different person, with a different situation. And it's very much, for me, this conversation is about the getting to know yourself as to when you can trust your innate wisdom as to what's helpful in a given moment. Like I remember hearing a while back another person that shares the same understanding talking about working with a client. And he was in front of the client, and the client was sharing some stuff. They'd been working together a little while, so he kind of knew the client a little bit. They'd done a fair bit of work. He kind of was getting a basic understanding of what he was sharing. And then something came up in the session around, I think it was to do with drinking and addiction and that sort of behaviour. And the person, the kind of facilitator of the session, for some reason, in a moment, that person was sharing, and they just went, "Stop! That is enough now." And then had a moment and said, "I shouldn't have said that to a client," but kind of managed to recover themselves because of what they kind of knew that, it's okay to trust, and when they were sharing this afterwards, they were like, for real, I had a real moment of a principles person who understands how they work would never shout at somebody. But on reflection, they could see actually in that moment, because the client then went, you're absolutely right. That's enough. I'm just lost in my thoughts and my stories. I don't need to do this. And the facilitator kind of had a moment of, wasn't I wise? I didn't even know that could come. But what they saw in that was, in that moment, that was absolutely the right thing to do. That was helpful for that client. And they kind of tried to second guess themselves. I can't shout at a client in that way. But what we see is, it wasn't something that then, that's how you treat every client in every session. It's knowing that for you in that moment, you can trust your wisdom. And that person that was in front of them, it was the thing that they needed. And they really saw to me, oh yeah, I've gone into my story and that's not helpful to me. Thank you for stopping me dead in my tracks. Let's get back to, discovering who I really am. And it's being able to see that, isn't it? To see that we can trust that wisdom in the moment. And it doesn't need to become right, every time I work with someone with addiction, on session 4, I must shout stop at them. It's knowing that what comes through.
And I guess in that moment, it is like, even if we go back to the printer thing, saying, let's stop and have lunch, that is hugely helpful. And yet, when you are caught in your mind, and to me in that moment, it's like, I knew you were right. But there's something in me wanting to, and it's so it's all it is. If we can hear it in a helpful way, it is incredibly helpful. And the whole, it is your thinking in this moment. It is because it is exactly the same as with the printer thing. It's like, no, I don't want it to be that. I want to be right here. I want to sort this problem out the way I think I should sort this problem out. But if we can actually hear, like Sid did in that moment, you are not insecure, you just think you are. Now, he could have got really mad at that person and said, how dare you, I am insecure, I do, it is like this. But if we can see, so to me, like you're saying, everything is helpful if we are prepared. One of the things we say is, it's all on the table. And it's like, if we are prepared to see it that way, everything is helpful. And for me, it is about knowing myself and knowing when to hold myself accountable. Like in that moment when you said, let's go for lunch, trust me, nothing in me wanted to go for lunch. I was so in my head about doing this printing, and yet there was just a little bit of me that knew that if we went to lunch, that would be a really, really good idea, and something different would come later. And I think part of kind of deepening your understanding and getting to know that is taking that choice. And the more that you do take those choices, they don't look like the most it looked to me like, stay and sort this problem out, stay however long it takes, stay here till midnight, don't move away from this printer until it's printed. And yet it's never, we don't get the answers in that, or certainly there's no need to do that, is there?
No. And it's very much like that, I mean, it was kind of out loud, it was me that said, let's go and have a break and have lunch and such. But then to me, I think what then happens is that somewhere in Deb, she hears that in a kind of quiet wisdom voice sort of way, if you like. And then there's that choice between hearing that and listening out for that, or ignoring it. And we're very, very good at ignoring it and overriding what is helpful, what comes through us.
Because the other stuff is really compelling.
Yeah. And it's just starting to be curious about, can I hear what's helpful in this moment when that, like in that example, when the printer's in front of me and it appears like I need to do this, can I be curious enough to hear that voice that, that's guiding me? Because I know what happens. We went off and had lunch, and I can't remember how long it was before you came back to it, but then something else had occurred to you as to how to make that printer do what it was supposed to do. And it just worked. And we did, I can't remember what it was we did now, because printers in my mind have, they have a world of their own, don't they? And you have to tick exactly the right, but something else had occurred to us by the time we came back from lunch. Oh, let's just press this button or push that thing. And it just worked. And that wasn't available. We couldn't see that before the lunch break, because, Deb was definitely up in her head and was kind of, I've got to do, and I'm over here at the desk kind of going, I don't know how to help. And then I kind of just saw this, maybe we should just take a step back from this. It's getting on towards lunchtime. Let's have a break. And it is that being able to just hear that quieter voice that says, and often it's something that's so, appears to be completely the opposite to what's actually going to fix the problem. If we walk away, how is that printer ever going to fix itself? It's not. But actually something about the moving away from it for a minute was extremely helpful in that moment. And it's just, for me, what is helpful is listening out and being curious about that voice that we all have, that can guide us to something that is useful in that moment, in whatever way, even if it feels like it's going completely against the, because our other voice, that kind of voice of, no, we must stay, no, I'm right, no, it must be this, that voice is very strong in a lot of us. It can be very compelling.
We're way more used to listening to that voice when we have it's like, if you label it, that's like, it's like our intellect, and our intellect is incredibly helpful, and I would not like to not have one, but it is, we were talking the other day somewhere, weren't we, about master and servant, and it is like, we have this deeper knowing, there is something, and we've all been in that situation, haven't we, when someone has kind of said, take a rest, step back, have a moment, this is, you're caught up here, you're not seeing straight, you're not seeing the wood for the trees, and there is something in us that knows that, and there is equally something in us that wants to keep looking, that wants to keep pushing forward. And to me, eventually we often get there, either way, whichever way we do it, but it just feels like there is a really helpful, softer, easier way here. Our intuition, our common sense, our deeper knowing, that part of us that hasn't been maybe given as much credibility. It hasn't been, because if we carry on pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and then the answer eventually comes, because our inner wisdom, our inner knowing, our common sense is determined to find a way through. So, if we get the answer, it could be like missing lunch, working late, not moving away from the printer, 10 o'clock that night, I eventually got the printing done. So it was me staying and slogging and doing all of those things. But equally, I am sure we can all see examples where we did listen to that. Just have a rest, have a break, come back. You've slogged your intellect, and your intellect is brilliant at the job that it does, but it's not great. It's our intuition, it is our inner knowing, it is our wisdom, it is that our common sense that gives us these little gems. And it's like, for me, the knowing myself is learning to listen for those gems, and they don't often appear as gems, because it is like common sense, because it's like, no, that can't, no, I know better, no. And it's kind of learning to know ourselves and to see that it's actually more helpful to go for that quieter, that little gem that's given us. And to me, what I see is, the more that we do that, the more that is available, and the more likely we are to take that. And I think if we just stop and look, I don't think there's anyone on this planet who hasn't kind of lived a little bit of life that hasn't got an example of, do you know what, I just went to bed, or I just went and a walk around the garden, or I just had 5 minutes, and ping, there was an answer appeared, or whatever.
Yeah, I think the other thing that kind of comes to me around what's helpful is the beautiful metaphor that came out of a retreat a couple of years ago that really stuck with me, was the metaphor of stepping stones. And we talk about, if you've ever been, and I'm sure most of us have at some point, across some sort of river or body of water that's got some stepping stones on it, and if you've crossed over those stepping stones, what for me that metaphor points to is that in a given moment, the stepping stone that you're on is the most helpful stepping stone that there is. It's the one under your feet.
Stopping you get your foot and wet.
It's the one that's stopping you getting wet. It's the one that's kind of keeping you
getting to the next.
on and
moving you forward.
And what we kind of, for me, that metaphor, what it does is shows to me that, I can get across a whole river one stepping stone at a time. But if I kind of try and cross that river and take every stepping stone with me, as I leave that one to the next one, I turn around and pick up the previous one, I won't get across that river. I'll be so weighed down with stepping stones that they become unhelpful. They become things that are weighing me down and stopping me moving forward. And it's like, for me, that's how this life works. It's like, what is helpful in this moment is extremely helpful in this moment. But if we then carry that forward as like a weight that holds us back, if we spent the whole of our lives going, every time I come up against a problem, the answer is to go and have lunch. Well, for one thing, I'd have more lunches in a day than I should. And it's seeing that was helpful in that moment. Yeah. And in another moment, that might not be the helpful thing to do. If we're carrying stuff with us, it becomes a burden rather than a help. And it's seeing that wisdom is of the moment. So we don't need to carry those with us as though they're, because what we can do is trust that wisdom comes, trust that it is there, trust that in that next moment, if we need something will come to us. Otherwise, it just becomes this ongoing burden. I've got to remember every time there's a problem that I should take a lunch break, or I should do some meditation, or I should, turn to Beck and ask her what she thinks. We've suddenly got a lot more on our mind than we need.
Yeah.
And that to me goes back to what I was sharing in the living and learning. Actually, we're looking to kind of come back to a quieter mind, not fill our mind up with more things to do. And for me, the way this works is that what is helpful is that we can trust that every time we pick up our foot and move it, the next stepping stone will be there. That's how this works. We don't need to carry them with us in case suddenly there's one missing and we need more. It comes in that moment. As we lift our foot and move forward, the next wisdom, the next helpful thing will be there. So it's not about having to burden ourselves with remembering all the different, tips and advice that people might have come up with. It's knowing
just one.
We can
you have
trust.
Wisdom, and you can stay and just live this moment.
Yeah, live this moment and trust that what is going to come to you in that moment, where your foot's going to land, is going to be solid and helpful. Because I know that's something I used to do a lot, is kind of try and carry all of the stuff with me. I need to remember to do, to breathe into the count of 10, breathe in and out to the count of 10 when I'm feeling this. But if this happens, I need to remember to go and do. And it's like, it just becomes this, it just makes our mind busier. And that's the exact opposite of what we're kind of pointing to here. It's about coming back to a quieter mind. And the quieter our mind is, the more that helpfulness comes through us anyway. Like we hear it clearer.
Yeah, and it is kind of like us learning to trust our wisdom in that moment, to know that we have it and learning to trust it. And do you know what? I've had moments when I've just got nothing and seeing that that's okay too. It looks to me like when you were saying about lifting your foot, I walk off that stepping stone and I lift the foot. And even when it doesn't look like there's anywhere that it's going to land, trusting that it will land somewhere the moment that it's meant to. And kind of, there has definitely been moments on calls and things when it's like, yeah, I've got nothing. Somebody says, and I've got nothing. And I know in the past it would be, I would really get into my head then and be thinking, right, I'm the one that's supposed to have the answers. I'm the one that's supposed to know this is how it's supposed to work. And it's just taking a breath and just trusting. Do you know what? If you've got nothing, you've got nothing. And that is okay too. It's just like trusting. I suppose it is a learning to trust life. So in a kind of a nutshell, what is helpful is you can trust life. And if we go right back to the kind of plants analogy and what was going on there, it was like, yeah, the plants find a way, life finds a way.
Yeah.
So shall we move on to our topic?
Yes,
for this week. So this week our topic is forgiveness. So yeah, this is an interesting one, isn't it? That brings up all sorts of things. But I think it was a little while ago now, but I think one of the things that really, really kind of was a game changer for me, was a huge moment when I realized, when I was thinking about forgiveness, and I was in a place where there was someone in my life who had done something and it didn't look to me like it was a good idea to forgive them. It was like, no, that was unforgivable. And I'm going to carry that with me forever because that was unforgivable. And I kind of had this story that forgiving the person meant that they were off the hook and meant that I was kind of saying what they did was okay. And I can't remember, it was in a conversation and I know I'd heard this before, but I suddenly saw that forgiving this other person wasn't about them. It was me that was going to be freed. You know, when I realized that actually, if I forgave that person, I was the one who was going to be free. And it kind of was reminding me about when you were talking about the stepping stones.
Yeah.
It was kind of like when I was keeping that in my pocket, that I had to remember this bad thing that the person had done and hold it against them forever. If I'm going to keep that in my pocket, I'm the one carrying the weight. And I don't know what's going on for the other person. And it looks to me, and I can see when I've done stuff, when I haven't been great, and it's looked to me like I will be off the hook when the other person forgives me. I see that it works that way too. The moment that I'm off the hook is when I forgive myself. And if the other person continues not to forgive me, then I can still be free. And if the other person does forgive me, but I still hold myself on the hook. So I see again, even that, when I have done something that I am not proud of, which in my life I have, I hold my hands up. There have been a few times I've done some things that I kind of wished I hadn't. And I see that me forgiving me is the moment that I'm off the hook. And so, when we hold something against ourselves or hold something against another person, we're the one holding it. And it's not, this isn't about saying that all behaviors are okay. It's not condoning that behavior, but it goes again to kind of trusting life and trusting each moment is a fresh moment, and we get a fresh chance in every moment. And we can behave differently in the next moment, and so can someone else, and we don't know when that's going to happen. And it feels a little bit like when you were saying it's above our pay grade to kind of sort that out. But for me, forgiveness of ourselves and forgiveness of other people carries with it a beautiful lightness.
Yeah, I think the first kind of thing that always comes to my mind when we kind of talk about forgiveness is that quote. I'm not sure exactly where it comes from, but it's the bearing a grudge against someone is like trying to poison somebody, like trying to kill somebody by eating the poison yourself.
Yeah.
And very much that's what I see around forgiveness. It's like we have it set up that by holding a grudge against someone, by not forgiving them, we are punishing them, but we are only ever punishing ourselves. It can't work any other way, because what we kind of talk about and what we share here is that what we feel and how we get our experience is through our own thinking. So when we're holding on to something, like Deb was sharing there, that she, for a long time was going to hold something against someone, never kind of let that go. It was her that was going to suffer that. It was her that was going to have that ongoing experience, that ongoing kind of pain and suffering of holding that. And it very much, for me, it's like when we start to look in this direction and we see where our experience is coming from, it stops making as much sense to us to hold stuff against people in that way. And I know, like, when we talk about forgiveness, the thing that kind of often comes up, and Deb's already touched on it, is sometimes it's we're holding on to something against another person, and other times it's against ourselves. But the same thing rings true for me. Like when we are not forgiving another person, or whether it's ourselves we're not forgiving, that it doesn't actually make a lot of sense when we start to look at how life works. It's like by holding something against ourselves, that doesn't do us or anybody else any favors either. Because I know it can sometimes look like if I don't forgive myself for XYZ, that's better, because then I won't do that thing again, or I won't, the other people that are might be holding it against me won't continue to suffer, or whatever it might be. But actually, when we kind of free ourselves from that grudge, free ourselves from that whatever it was we did, we become a better person. We're free. Again, it comes back to that clearer mind thing. And we have more to give. We are more capable and more amazing when our mind is quieter. And if we, like I know one of Deb's examples was that for a long time she held some stuff against herself that she'd done. And when she'd finally got to a point where she could kind of feel a bit free about it, somebody had a conversation with her and said, you can't be happy, that's not fair, you did all of these things, you should be, you know, holding that against yourself and holding yourself accountable in that way. And for a little while Deb went, yeah, they're right, I did all those terrible things, I need to make sure, you know, that that's held against me forever. And then another person came to her and said, you've been an incredible example to me, you've grown stronger, you've become a better person, you've been more capable of being a good person in my life, a good example in my life. If you slip back into that, I can't forgive myself, how does that help me? How does that help other people? How does it help your children, your family, your loved one? You're actually a better example and you're a stronger person when you have moved on from the stuff that you've done. So for me, this forgiveness conversation is both things.
Yeah.
It's ourselves and it's other people, because ultimately we're all one here. So when I've been able to let go of something, that benefits me and everybody. That's how this works.
Absolutely. And even when a behavior is ongoing, I you know, to me, it's kind of that there is sense in trying to hold something against somebody to make them behave differently doesn't work. And even again, going back to trying to hold something against, you know, if you've ever behaved in a certain way and you don't like the way you behave, being horrible to yourself because you behave that way, that's not been my experience, that my behavior changes like that. You know, when I've got something, like you say, when our minds are clearer and freer, we are way more likely to do something amazing from there, to do something better, to behave differently. And yet when, you know, if I've got something on my mind, I can't behave like that, I can't do it. When it's on my mind to that extent, I'm way more likely to do it because I'm giving it lots and lots and lots of attention. And yet when I'm kind of a lot lighter and it is the stepping stone moment and I move on to the next stepping stone, and when I realize, you know, life isn't on me in that way. Very much, you know, that incident that Beck was talking about, for a long time, you know, I didn't do great in my life, and I really hated myself because I was just, I thought I was useless, I was no good, you know, and my behavior wasn't great, and I can't go back and change that behavior, and I can't look at it even now and condone it and say, well, yeah, you know, you should have behaved like that. But what I can see is, with the thinking that I had in those moments, I couldn't do anything different but what I did. You know, that was me then, and that happened. And there's no point, you know, me holding that against myself isn't going to move me forward and make me behave better. If anything, it's going to be like having pockets full of stepping stones. It's just going to hold me down. And it's not going to help. And I can really see when other people are really, really behaving badly, holding that behavior against them in that way, you know. And it's not that there aren't consequences. I don't mean that. I don't mean that there wouldn't be consequences. I don't, you know, if somebody does something, I don't mean, oh, they shouldn't go to prison, or they shouldn't, you know, answer for their crimes or anything like that. But it is kind of really, really seeing that life doesn't work the way that it first appears in this, and forgiveness allows us to move forward with that clearer mind that we're talking about. It allows us to see something new and see something different, and we can see that in ourselves and in other people. And I just think there is magic when in seeing that for ourselves and for other people. And I guess it is something that we have to see for ourselves in that moment. But it is one of those places where I know kind of Becca and I say this a little bit, but it's an invitation to kind of play with it. And absolutely forgive yourself if you're not able to forgive someone in this moment. That's a starting point, to just be like, no, I want to hold this against that person. Well, that's cool. You know, just a starting point would be to be okay with that in you in this moment, because being where you are, you know, we can't not be where we are. When I wasn't behaving in a great way, when I did all of those things that I did, it's kind of like, that's where I was in that moment, and I'm okay that that's where I was in that moment. And I can see that accepting ourselves and being okay with who we are right now. It's not, okay, so I'll forgive myself when I behave better, or I'll, get past this in some future time. It's like, no, there's only this moment. And wherever we are in this moment, start here, start now. I remember something my granddad used to say when I was little, anyone, if you were going somewhere, he'd always just be like, his joke was, if I was going there, I wouldn't start from here. And I think we can put that on ourselves in our lives, can't we? We can kind of go, okay, so if I'm going to forgive, I can't start forgiving here. I've got to get somewhere first before I can. And it's like, no, the first step happens here now. And it's what's doable in this moment for you, what stepping stone, what is helpful right now in this moment for you. And I just think kind of having these conversations and opening the door of possibility, opening the door of what is available and can be there, having a glance at that. And sometimes we're kind of in a place, no, shut that door, not ready, and that's cool. But it's just like, there's a door there when you're ready, and just do what's doable right now in this moment.
And I think the thing, as you were sharing there, Deb, was coming to me, was the other word that I sometimes use instead of forgiveness is acceptance. And it's the acceptance of what is, because exactly like in
the greenhouse,
in that one, and in my granddad's joke was, it's like, actually you can't ever start a journey from somewhere you're not. That's just not possible, because even if you were going to start the journey from 3 streets away, you've got to get to that position too. So you can never start a journey from where you are not. And somehow the seeing that acceptance of this moment, of where you are and where the other person is in this moment, begins the journey of forgiveness. It begins that, it starts something in us, because we can't be where we're not. So when we come back to where we are and we are accepting of that, the journey begins. We start to move towards whatever that is. It's impossible to kind of go, I want to be a better person, but to get to be a better person, I can't forgive myself or accept myself until I'm a better person. There's no sense in that. From this place of acceptance or forgiveness, we can begin the journey. And automatically from there, we are already a better person, because we're in that clearer mind straight away. And from there, amazing things happen.
What's coming to me when you're saying that is this another funny little joke that my granddad used to say.
He's a funny guy.
He was quite funny, actually. He used to always say, yeah, I'll do that tomorrow. Yeah, I'll do that tomorrow. It was just a funny thing between him and my grandma. My grandma would say, well, do this or whatever. And he'd go, yeah, I'll do that tomorrow. And his constant thing was, yeah, I'll do that tomorrow. And it was this joke that it's not going to happen. And to me, that is the place we put ourselves when we're going, I'm not going to start from here. I'm going to start when I get somewhere else. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to start tomorrow. And tomorrow never actually comes. We're always going to do it tomorrow. That's like, so it's actually here, now, this moment. And it's like, if I'm starting a journey from 3 streets over, it's always going to be 3 streets over. If I'm going to start my journey tomorrow, it's only ever going to be today. Today is all we ever have. So you are never going to start your journey. And it is like, so here, now, in this moment. This is the only moment we will ever have. We will never have tomorrow. We will always only ever have here, now, today. So it's kind of like, absolutely start from where you are right here, because I spent a lifetime starting something tomorrow. When I get somewhere else, that's when I'm going to do it. There isn't somewhere else, there's here. That's it. You'll always only ever be here.
And I think the kind of invitation from us is always to be playful and curious about
absolutely.
This. So
absolutely.
It's go and have a bit of fun with it. See where you are now, and see where there's an acceptance in that. So
I have just realised when we it was totally me at the very, very beginning, we didn't do our loving.
I was going to say that because I've got my loving all set up on purpose. So I was going to say, before we tell you what's coming next week, we've got to skip back because we didn't do our loving, and I have to do mine.
Go. Oh,
my loving this week is our beautiful friend Helen Goff, who sent me in the post a necklace that I ordered from her a while back. She makes her own necklaces, and I ordered it before lockdown with the intention that we were going to see each other a couple of weeks afterwards, and we haven't. So she's made it and sent it me in the post, and it's a very beautiful necklace that you can't quite tell. I don't know if I can get close enough that you can quite tell, but on the inner circle here there's the words love, peace and wisdom printed, and then I have to show you the back as well because it's absolutely beautiful. I've got a little
a little
clasp that opens up, and it's a heart shape. So my loving this week is my new necklace and our beautiful Helen Goff. So thank you, Helen. It's gorgeous. It was a great little treat to get in the post yesterday, and so I wore it on purpose today.
Well, I realised I had some loving because interestingly, my loving this week is our beautiful friends Anne and Peter, because they have just blown my mind with how amazing they have been through lockdown. And then Anne unfortunately had a little bit of an accident last week, and I just think that they are an amazing couple. They've just been, and some of the emails that have been going backwards and forwards since then, so massive shout out and huge love to Anne and Peter. I just think they're brilliant. So
and Helen and Anne are very good friends, so that all fits very nicely as our
beautiful people. Yes, I did, it just popped into my head. I was looking at, oh gosh, I moved on and we didn't do that, so yeah
it would come to my mind too.
Absolutely.
So that's our show for this week, and so next week we'll be back with our question: what do you do when you don't know what to do? It's a tongue twister of a question, so that'll be fun.
Ask Deb.
And our topic next week, on the beautiful finish with who we're loving, is people are awesome. So we're going to talk a bit about that next week too. So we hope you've enjoyed the show, and wherever you're watching this, if you're watching on our Facebook watch party, big hello and thank you for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks very much. It's great to have you. Make sure you subscribe so you get next week's show.
Absolutely.
And anywhere else you've caught us, keep in touch. It's great to have you with us on the show. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. Bye.
Bye.